starting with verse, did I say 27? 26. Starting in chapter 26, and we'll start in verse 17. Now, last week we actually covered verses 17 through 19, and I'll just kind of go over it again real quickly to call our attention to the situation here. Now here it is, he starts out and he says, Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, Where wilt thou that we make ready for thee to eat the Passover? Here he's using unleavened bread and Passover synonymously. And you say, well, how could they do that? The feast of the Passover came on the 14th day of the first Jewish month. And there's your passage in Exodus 12 that tells you that that's it. Then in the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, that started on the 15th day of the same month. So the next day it started, and it lasted for 7 days. So actually you have an 8-day feast. In Leviticus here, why it tells us that this started, unleavened bread, on the 15th day of the same month, and it goes on down for 7 more days down to the 21st. So here's what the Jews did. The Jews, since the feast of the Passover came on the 14th all time, and the unleavened bread started on the 15th all the time, and in both of these feasts, you had to remove all the leaven away from your house, and you couldn't eat any leaven. Then it was called either the Feast of the Passover, unleavened bread. They just used these, really, names to interchangeably to describe that. This explains in the New Testament why, when it talks about getting ready to kill Peter, that they got him, they locked him up here because of the days of the unleavened bread, and they weren't going to put him to death until after the Passover. So those two terms are used interchangeably, and that's the way he used them right here. Now, I'm not going to get around to this one right here for quite some time, so let's just leave that one up there for just a minute. So now that we're talking here about the Feast of the Passover, so let's start out now in verse 20. It said, Now when even was come, he was sitting at meat with the 12 disciples, and as they were eating, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceeding sorrowful, and began to say unto him, every one, Is it I, Lord? And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. Now the Son of Man goeth, even as it is written of him, but woe unto that man through whom the Son of Man is betrayed, for it were good for that man had he never been born. And Judas, who betrayed him, answered and said, Is it I, Rabbi? He saith unto him, Thou hast said. Now, when you put Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all together, they all tell about this. And what happened was that Jesus sat down, and he and we have to understand he didn't sit at a table like we do. They reclined, and the Greek word says reclining. So think about reclining, and it would be like this, that if you had a circular couch, that's really what it was a circular couch. And they might have 2 or 3 of them for a big banquet. But a person would get up on this couch, and you would lie down, and then up here with your hand like this, and you would eat. The tray, the table would be out in front of you. So you ate while you were reclining in this reclining position. So here it is, I'm here. There's a guy down here next to my feet, and a guy over there next to his, and then another guy laying out here. And so you didn't have just a real close association here with him in this way. You would have 2 or 3 people that would be able to eat off of the one table. Now, they had what would we call it, a casserole, or what's that thing that you call, where you have those cheeses and you put bread in it and dip it up? Fondue, okay, kind of like fondue. So they'd have these dishes, and then they would have these breads, and they would reach out and reach in this and eat it. Then get another piece of bread and reach in here, and this was called a sop instead of fondue. So they called it a sop. So there'd be 2 or 3 people eating in this. Now, Jesus is sitting down, getting ready to eat the Last Supper. And then he makes the announcement, One of you shall betray me. Now, here's where you and I have a problem. And that is, we know who betrayed him. We know how it happened. And it's hard for us to conceive what they thought. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Now, when Jesus said, "One of you shall betray me," did they have any idea when this would take place? Whether any idea in their mind it would be that very night? For instance, if I were to say, now, some of you are going to get mad at me. Or let's say, one of you is going to get mad at me. What do you know? We're here. We're just happy as we can be. Everybody's my friend. It's a joyous time. But I make the announcement. One of you is going to get mad at me. Now, somebody tell me how that's going to happen. You don't have any idea. You don't know whether it's something I'm going to say in class or whether it'll be next year. You don't have any idea. So when he said, "One of you shall betray me," that really didn't get them upset because they didn't know, like you and I know, that it's getting ready to happen this very night. So, "One of you shall betray me." Now that was shocking. So they began to ask him. And they said, "Is it I, Lord? Is it I, Lord?" Now here's another interesting thing about this. We would picture, "Is it I, Lord?" No. 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 That's not what took place. The Greek has a way of asking a question, and they can give the answer before they ask it. We do it kind of rhetorical with the sound of our voice. And if you said something about someone's going to do something bad to you, I'd say, "Well, it's not I, is it?" Now, I'm not really asking a question. I'm telling you, I can't conceive of it being me. It's not me, is it? Now, what they did, as the Greeks asked questions, they would say yes or no at the very beginning of it. And so they'd say, "No, it's not I. No, it's not I." So each one of them are going around, and what they were saying wasn't just asking, "Are you talking about me? Are you talking about me? Are you talking about me?" What they were saying is, "You're not talking about me, are you? Not talking about me. You're not talking about me." See? And so they were going around. So now he's identified them as one of the 12. Then he makes an interesting statement. He says, "It's he who puts who's dipping the sop with me." Well, here's your fondue pot. There's another, and over there. There's only 3-4 people could reach the fondue pot. Then there'd be another one over here. So now he's got it down within 3, 4, 5 people anyway. It's one of these. Huh. Then finally he says, "It's the one I give the sop to." And he dipped in and handed it to Judah. Now how would you feel if you were in Judas's shoes? And especially after Judas has already made these arrangements, hasn't he? He's already made the arrangements to betray him. And now then, Judas knows that Jesus knows that he's getting ready to betray him. Now, the word for betray literally means deliver up, deliver beside. He's getting ready to deliver me. One of you are getting ready to deliver me. And then he hands it to Judas. And Judas says, "Is it I, Lord?" And he said, "You said it," which is another way of saying, that's what it is. That was their way of saying, you stated it yourself. Then, now I'm telling this story in here rather than reading it. I read you out of Matthew. But we get most of this story out of the book of John. And since we're studying Matthew, we're not jumping around a whole lot. I'm going to jump around a whole lot here a little bit more tonight, but trying to put the story together. So now, there sits Judas. Now, he's found out. Now then, the Lord says to him, "Whatever you're going to do it quickly." And as at that time it says, Satan entered into him. I don't know how this happened, except it was at that time he made his final decision. The final decision is made. I either have to do it now or not do it at all. It's one of those things, I guess, like when you're a kid and you're out jumping into a cold river or something, and you stand up on the board and you're about to jump and somebody says, whatever you're going to do it now. If you're going to jump, do it now. So you have to make up your mind, well, okay, and so you either jump or you don't jump. Well, Jesus is putting him on the spot. Now, I want us to see this is really a favor that Jesus is doing to Judas. Jesus didn't just call Judas, and then Judas do this, and then him not having a chance. Judas, think how many chances Judas has had. Jesus now has told him, now, one of you betrayed me. Judas at that moment knew who it was because he was guilty. He had already made the plans. And then everybody's asking. And then he says, it's one that eats the sop with me, dips the sop. Now then it narrows them down. I can just see if I were in Judas's shoes. Wow. And then it's the one I give it to. He gave it to. Now it's about time for you to really back out and say, Lord, I'm sorry. And then he looks up and says, whatever you do, do it now. Make up your mind. Is it a go or no go? That's favor to him. Trying to get him to change his mind. At that moment, Judas jumped up, ran out, and started making the plans for betraying him. Now, Jesus doesn't tell the disciples when or where this is going to be, so he goes ahead then with the Lord's Supper. Now then, in verse 26, it says, and as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed and brake it. Now, what kind of bread would this be, as we've already learned in these charts, actually, that I put up here and we studied about last week? What kind of bread would it be? What's the only kind of bread the Jews could eat on the Passover? Unleavened bread. So now, he took the bread and blessed and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. Now, I'm going to emphasize that for right now. Take this and eat it. This is my body. Then, in verse 27, he took the cup and gave thanks and gave to them, saying, drink you all of it. That literally means all of you drink of it. That's what it means. All of you drink of it, for this is my blood. Now, he gives them the bread. This is my body. He gives them the fruit of the vine, of which he'll identify later as fruit of the vine. Right here it says he took the cup. And the Jews would take at the Passover, the fruit of the vine, whether it's fermented or unfermented, in whatever condition they wanted it, but that's what they would drink at the Passover. And he will identify it down here as the fruit of the vine. In fact, down in verse 29, why he tells you what it is. So he took this fruit of the vine, and by the way, nowhere does it say wine, nowhere does it say fermented or unfermented. It says fruit of the vine. That is the grape juice in whatever stage that it might be. So, he said, this is my body and this is my blood. Now that statement has caused a lot of problems, doctrinal problems down through the ages. When he says, this is my body and this is my blood, the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages said what actually happens from this verse is that they call it transubstantiation. Now, substantiation means substance, what it's really made of. And they say that when the priest blesses the bread, there is a transformation take place. It literally turns into the body of Christ. And when he blesses the blood, the fruit of vine, it literally turns into the blood of Christ. It's literal. Now you say, well, it doesn't taste like it. And they say, no, I know it doesn't taste like it, but it is. It's actually, literally, the body of Jesus and the blood that's offered every Sunday. Now the Lutherans then, when they then broke off from the Catholics, they said, no, that's not true. It's consubstantiation. Now con means same as, with. And so the substance doesn't really change into the body and blood, but it is the same as the body and the blood. And you say, well, I don't see the difference. Well, nobody's ever been able to describe the difference or explain the difference, but this is an argument that has gone on between these two groups for the last 700 years, I guess, trying to determine really what it's talking about. Now, this is obviously talking about the same thing that Jesus was talking. It's figurative language. When Jesus in John 10 says, I am the door. Now, does anybody think that Jesus turned into a door with hinges and a doorknob? See? No, I'm a door. It's figurative language. If anybody wants to come to God, you have to come through the door. You have to come through me. So, I'm the door. When he talked about Herod, he said, you go tell that old fox. Now, he wasn't saying that Herod had 4 legs and a tail, but he had the characteristics of a fox. Now, when Jesus said, take this and eat it, for this is my body, I guess when they took it and they ate it, if Jesus had just disappeared, we'd have said it's literal, wouldn't we? But there stood Jesus. He didn't change. There's his body. He said, you eat it, this is my body, which means it stands for my body. He said, as often as you do it in remembrance of me. It's a memorial. It's a remembrance. So, and the same thing with the blood is a memorial. So, when you drink the fruit of the vine, it is to remind you of Jesus shedding his blood. So, he now is instituting the Lord's Supper. He's setting it up. This is all he's telling them to do. This is what you're going to do. Now, later on in the book of Acts and the book of 1 Corinthians, we learned that the church came together to break bread, to partake of this. They did it on the first day of the week. So we learned this from other places. But here he said, this now is what you're to do. So, he said, then in verse 28, he said, all of you drink of it, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many unto remission of sins, or for the remission of sins. I'm going to shed my blood. It will be poured out so your sins can be remitted or sent away. Now it says, the blood of the covenant. In those countries back there throughout the Bible, all the Middle East countries, they would seal a covenant with blood. They would, and it was animal blood that they would seal it with, but it was always a blood that they used to ratify it. When we say ratify, it means that makes it go into effect. If I were to draw up a will tonight about dispersing my money, it would be just a document. It would be useless until it's ratified. Or you say, well, how do you ratify it? Well, in our nation, you notarize it with witnesses. And so there has to be some witnesses or a notary be able to do this. So this is my blood, not the blood of bulls and goats, not the blood of animals that ratifies other covenants, but I'm going to ratify this covenant that I'm making with you, this new covenant, the New Testament. I'm going to put it into force with my blood. And so I want you to remember that as you partake then of this cup. Then he says, verse 29, but I say unto you, I shall not henceforth, or from this time, after this Passover, I shall not henceforth of this fruit of the vine partake of it, drink of it, until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. So he said, this will be the last time I will eat this Passover with you. This will be the last time that I will drink this fruit of the vine until I drink it new with you in the kingdom. Now, the kingdom is going to be established on the day of Pentecost. Jesus will die tomorrow, after he's saying this. He will die. He'll be in the grave for 3 days. Then he'll raise. Then he will be there. They'll be there in Jerusalem. Or he'll be, after he raised, he'll be in the country for 40 days. Then he'll send back up to heaven. And then 10 days later, so it's going to be 50 days then. After this, the kingdom's going to be established. Now he said, I'll not partake of this fruit of the vine with you until I do it in the kingdom. That's going to be after the church is established. Now, the word new is in here, and it says, when I drink it with you, let's see, but I say unto you, I shall not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you. Now, we might say, well, does that mean new fruit of the vine? Or I think it means in a new method. I will drink it in a new way with you in the kingdom. I'll not be picking up the glass like we're doing right now. I'll not be partaking of it literally on this earth like we're doing right now. But I will be partaking it with you in a new way, a new manner. So in 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, then we're told, when we partake of the Lord's Supper, then we are having fellowship with Him in doing this. And so He is with us. He is watching us. As we partake of this, He is a participant with us. And I think He's saying, I do it anew, in a new way. You'll still be drinking. You'll still be drinking the fruit of the vine, but I'll be partaking with you in a new way then in my Father's kingdom. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Now, an interesting thing about this, and that's this next chart right here, and I think I'll not take time to really go into this, but Luke tells us that the disciples had a discussion at this time. Now, you and I take this really seriously, this establishing the Lord's Supper. But after they had done that, then they get in an argument about who's going to be the greatest here in this kingdom that's coming. Now, they've argued about this once before, haven't they? And now then they're going to argue about it again, you see, in doing this there. So Jesus now is getting ready to leave, and he goes out, went out to the Mount of Olives. And when Jesus said unto them, all ye shall be offended in me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. Now Zechariah 12:7 prophesies that as a shepherd he would be smitten, and then think about sheep out on a mountain, and somebody comes in and they're causing such a disturbance that they kill the shepherd. The sheep is scattered. Somebody comes in and does that. So they're going to kill the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. So Jesus now is telling them. Now he says in here, all of you are going to be offended in me tonight, this very night. Now he just got through saying one of them was going to betray him. Now then he said, all of you are going to be offended in me. Now the word offended means you're going to stumble. You're going to fall. You're not going to be able to go all the way through the night with me, standing by my side, claiming to be my disciples, my sheep. All of you are going to stumble this very night. I can't imagine what they would think about at that time. You put yourself in their shoes. Well, he quoted prophecy. He said, because it's prophesied. 32. He said, but after I am raised up, I will go before you into Galilee. So now, he tells them, you're going to be scattered tonight. But I want you to know, after I'm raised up, I will go before you into Galilee. Try to put this in perspective, since you and I know the story. Tonight, they're going to be scattered when the Roman soldiers comes out. They're going to be running away. They're going to take Jesus and kill him. And when they kill him, what do the disciples do? Do they all get together and say, we will stay here until he raises? Nope. They say, well, let's go fishing. So they head back home to Galilee. So they started that very night, and they scattered into Galilee. Now Jesus said, I'm going to tell you guys something. This very night, all of you will be offended in me. All of you are going to fall, but I'll meet you in Galilee after I'm raised up. Now, 4 times, Jesus has said, I'm going to be delivered up and be killed. They don't believe him yet. And now when he says, I'll be raised up, I have no idea what they're thinking. Probably still wondering what he's talking about. Well, this thing, all of you shall be offended in me. This is on Peter's mind. This is on Peter's mind. He's not going to let that stop. But Peter answered and said unto him, if all shall be offended in thee, I will never be offended. So kind of put this there. Here's 11 disciples. Judas is gone. So here stands Peter and 10 of his comrades. And Jesus said, all of you will be offended in me. And Peter says, Lord, if all the rest of them are offended in you, I won't be. In other words, he makes a proclamation of who is the greatest of this whole thing. I'll not be offended, even though all these other guys might. And Jesus said unto him, verily I say unto you that this night, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice, 3 times. And Peter said unto him, even if I must die with thee, yet I will not deny thee. And likewise all of his disciples said this. So all the rest of them jumped in and said, me too, me too, me too. I'll not deny you either. But now Jesus has told them they're going to be offended. He's told them that they're going to be scattered. He's told them he'd gather them back up in Galilee. And Peter jumps in, and Peter now has asserted, the rest of them may do it, but I'll not, Lord. The rest of them are saying, me too. And Peter said, the Lord said, Peter, tonight, this very night, you will not only be offended in me, but you will deny me 3 times before the cock crows, this very night. What did Peter think? It's so hard to, because you and I know what happened. Peter has no idea that the Roman army are going to come out and take him. Peter has no idea what's going to happen. The only thing Peter knows is how strong he is. Peter knows, I am so strong that if everybody else denies you, I will not do it. And then when you're told, you'll not only do it, but you're going to deny me 3 times in one night before the morning, before the cock crows in the morning. It seemed to me like that would blow his mind. I don't know what he would think about that is in there. Okay. As we start now looking at this, they went out here into the Mount of Olives. And Mount of Olives is over here. This picture is taken up from the temple where Jesus was. You're looking over, it's about a half a mile from where this picture is taken over there. There's where I put that yellow around. That's the Garden of Gethsemane. Now that whole mountainside is the Mount of Olives. And they call it the Mount of Olives instead of the Mount of Apples because they raised olive trees on there. And then down here is where they had the Garden of Gethsemane. Now Gethsemane, that word means olive presses. So there you have the whole mountain filled full of olive trees. And then down here there is a garden of where the olive presses are, of where people pick their olives, bring them down, and then use the presses, and they'd press the olive oil out in that particular area there. So that now is where they went. And they came into a place which was called then Gethsemane then. In verse 36, and then cometh Jesus with them to a place called Gethsemane. Here's what the garden looks like. It's still, the terrain and everything is the same as you can look at it, and that is in there. Where Jesus was, where this took place, we don't have any idea, but they know where the garden itself actually is. There's old olive trees that are there that are several hundred years old there. Okay, now then, Jesus comes out, and now I'm going to start using some of these slides to kind of compare the different gospel writers as they're there. It said, then cometh Jesus in Matthew with them to a place in Gethsemane, and said to his disciples, set you here while I go yonder and pray. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee. What were their names? James and John. So Peter, James, and John, and began to be sorrowful and sore troubled. Then saith he unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Abide you here and watch with me. So I want you to picture now, they go into this garden, and he sets out the 7 apostles, said, you stay here. He takes the 3 that he had always taken with him on special occasions, takes them up farther, and he tells them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Now, the way you and I would say that is, I am so sad I could die. My problems are so heavy, I could die. And Mark tells us the same thing that he says there. Then saith he unto them, or in there, he said, abide here. Now then in verse 39, and he went forward a little and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass away from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Now we're going to look at the way Jesus prayed. He had this one thing on his mind, and that is what he was going to have to go through that's there. And so, let this cup pass away. That's, again, figurative language. Let this horrible event that I'm going to have to go through, please let it pass away, but nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And a second time he went away and prayed, saying, my Father, if this cannot pass away, except I drink it, thy will be done. Let thy will be done, but if it can. And then he came again and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy, and he left them again and went away, and prayed a third time, saying the same words. So here it is that he goes back on these 3 different occasions. And his prayer is always the same, that this cup might pass away if it's possible. Look over in Mark. He prays, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He comes back, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Remove this cup from me. Howbeit, not what I will, but as thou wilt. Now, let's look at this situation right here for just a moment. He's pleading with God, if it be possible. If it be possible. Here he says, then he recognizes all things are possible. So then we say, why didn't God let this pass away? Why didn't he do it in a different way? That's what the Lord is praying for. If it's possible, please don't make me go through this. But if it's not possible, and I have to, then let thy will be done, I will go through it. Now, I might ask you a question. Don't raise your hand because it's a trick question. Are all things possible with God? Whichever way you answer it, you're wrong. Without an explanation. It's one of those things that I asked Steve. Steve, have you quit beating your wife? Just yes or no, that's all I want. And there he sits. Whatever he says is a bad answer. Okay. All things are possible with God. But the Hebrew writer says, it is impossible for God to lie. So are all things possible with God? No. It's not possible for God to lie. When it talks about are all things possible with God, it means all things within the realm of that which is true and right. That which is just and true and right. It's not possible for God to lie. He can't do that. He is totally good. And now another thing, it's not possible for God to let Jesus go by without going through this night and this death on the cross. It's not possible for God to do it. If it is possible, God didn't answer his prayer. Because his prayer is, if it is possible, let this pass from me. But let thy will be done. So now we raise the question, what do you mean it's not possible for God to do this? I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit to throw in another equation in here. You remember when the Roman army comes out and Peter draws that sword and starts hacking away, and the Lord said, put up your sword? Don't you know that even now I could call upon the Father, and how many angels would he send? See? 12 legion of angels he'd send right now. So it was possible. It was possible even while the Roman army, after the Roman army arrested him, it was possible for God to deliver him so he wouldn't go to the cross. So it was possible. So then we have to wrestle with it. Well then, in what sense was it not possible? What are you saying? Okay, listen carefully. It was not possible for God to let this cup, this hour, pass away from Jesus and still be the Savior of mankind. If God is going to save mankind, Jesus has to do it with His blood. It takes the blood of the Son of God to wash away sins. And without the shedding of blood, Hebrew writer says, there is no remission. And he says the blood of animals will not do it. It takes the blood of the Son of God, the innocent Son of God, to wash away our sins. So if Jesus had called upon God, Father, save me, and God had sent 12 legions of angels, rescued Jesus, Jesus went back up to heaven, that would have been fine. God could do it. Jesus could do it. But there's only one thing that would not happen, and what is it that would not happen? Mankind would not be saved. So it was not possible for God to rescue him for this hour. And one says, well, why does it take the blood of the Son of God? My answer to that is I don't know. I don't know. Why is it? Why is it that some diamonds are worth $20 million and some aren't worth $20? Why is it? I don't know. Bring the diamonds and show them to me. I'll look them over. I don't know. Now, if you wanted to get that answer, why is it one diamond is worth millions and one's not? Who would you go to? Wouldn't go to me, would you? You might call Oliver. Oliver? Now, why in the world would you call Oliver instead of me? Because I've already told you I know everything. Because I don't have any idea. And I'll tell you another thing about diamonds. I don't think there's a diamond in the world worth $50 million. I don't think there's a diamond in the world worth $1 million. I don't think there's a diamond worth $1,000, if you want me to be truthful with you. Just honest, write down honest, truthful. And I can come on down even under that. I don't think there's a diamond in the world that's worth $500. Now, I've expressed my opinion. What are diamonds worth? Did my opinion change what diamonds are? Oliver, you going to bring the price down tomorrow? No, he's still. Well, why? Because he knows what is the fair value of that diamond. Now, only God knows what the fair value of sins is. Only God knows. And only God is intelligent enough to understand and just enough to say it must be paid. And God says, just like somebody else says this diamond's $50 million because they know the value, God says it takes the blood of Christ to wash away sins. So when Jesus is praying, if it be possible, but not my will, but thy will be done. Then look over at Luke. Up there, the first part of verse 42 says the same thing. And there appeared unto him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. And his sweat became, as it were, great drops of blood falling down upon the ground. So he's in such great agony that an angel came to minister to him. We're not told what the angel said. Obviously, the angel would let him know you have to go through it and so forth, but he knew that, and so we don't know what the angel said, but it came to comfort him in some way, to strengthen him. But then sweat came forth as great drops of blood. That's a statement that the medical profession has studied. And the latest that I read on it is that the medical profession has verified about 100 cases of where a human being has suffered so tremendously great that blood came out through the sweat pores. And about 100 different cases. And said every time it was always something that happened to where they were getting ready to go into this torture. It wasn't just during the torture, but as they were getting ready to go into this horrendous torture that they knew where their bodies were going to be ripped apart or something. And so the medical profession says this actually happens when a torture, the anticipation of it, becomes so great. And so the blood came forth through these sweat glands and came forth in that way. Well, while he's there praying with all of this, it said, and while he spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, this is Judas, gave the Romans a sign, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that is he, take him. Now a kiss was the normal way of salutation, like handshaking is today. And straightway he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Rabbi, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, do that for which thou art come. Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. Now, when you put these others together, well, there's a few other little things you can find. And straightway while he yet spake, came Judas, one of the 12, and a multitude of swords and staves, and that's clubs, from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now he that betrayed him had given them a token, saying, Whomsoever I kiss, that is him, take him away. And when he came to him and said, Rabbi, and kissed him, they laid hands on him. Luke says, while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them, and he drew near to kiss Jesus. But Jesus said, now I want you to get this, see, Luke's going to tell us a little bit. Jesus said this before Judas kissed him. But Judas said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? Now put yourself in Judas's shoes. Remember all those things we've talked about with Judas? How that he was sitting there and the Lord made him go through that soul-searching situation of, I know who it is that's going to betray me. And then Judas, it's time to make up your mind. Whatever you do, do it now. Are you going to change your mind and be faithful to me? Or are you going to go on through with the betrayal? Whatever it is, do it now. He jumped up and he went. And of course he knows now the Lord knows. But he has to carry it through. He doesn't know that the Lord knows that he's going to be doing it with a kiss. As far as he knows, why the Lord may think he's going to come out and point a finger and say, there he is, or something of this nature. But Judas is coming out, and Judas walks up in front of all these soldiers, and he's first in line, and he starts up to Jesus. And Jesus then looks at him and says, Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? And Judas went ahead and kissed him. Awesome. When you think about what must have been through his mind, what must have been through the mind of Judas as he did this. It said, and Judas who betrayed him knew the place, for Jesus was there, and so he went out. And now then down about verse 45, it says here in John, this is where we get over here to kind of finish the story. And they answered him, he came out and he answered, he said, whom do you seek? Who do you want? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus saith unto him, I am he. And Judas also, who betrayed him, was standing with them. Now we're going to throw another little bit of information in here. This happens before Judas kissed him. This happens before Jesus says this to Judas. So Judas is there. And Jesus, before Judas ever comes up to him, he walks out and says, who are you after? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. And then he stood before them and he said, I am he. And they went backwards and fell to the ground. So how many of these soldiers there were, I don't know. Was this a miracle? I don't know. If it wasn't, the only other explanation is that there's two explanations it's giving. People argue about it, and nobody will know. But all these soldiers fell to the ground, which is quite unusual. The only other way that I could think they could do it is that the ones in front, when he says that, is backing up into the others and knocking them down, and it's kind of a domino effect. And so it's one or the other in this way. But it's a shocking thing. They fell to the ground. And so he asked them again, "Whom seek ye?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus answered, "I told you I am he. If therefore you seek me, let these go their way, that the word might be fulfilled which he spake, of those whom thou hast given me, I lost not a one." So you're after me? Let these other 10 men go then. Now, Simon Peter, therefore, now by the way, this would be the time then when Judas goes up to meet him, and then he says, "Are you going to betray me with a kiss?" And he kissed him, and then they run in and arrest him. But I want you to think of all the times that Judas had to back out and think about what he was doing and not go through with this. Simon Peter, therefore, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Now the servant's name was Malcolm. Kind of interesting. You just have to picture this. This was not a play fight. Peter had out his sword. These soldiers rushing in there, and he comes down on that guy in that crowd and cuts off his ear. He was aiming to kill the guy, but missed and cut off that ear. And he said his name was Malcolm. Now therefore Jesus said unto Peter, "Put up the sword into the sheath. The cup which Father hath given me, shall I not drink it?" So he said, "Don't I have to go through what the Father has given me?" Of course, this then is when the other writer says, I could call for 12 legions of angels right now, and the Father would send them to me. But the Father has given me this cup. I must go through it. I must drink it. Now, the reason I put this other down here is a few verses later, Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Now, this other disciple would be John. John's customary way all the way through his gospel is never to mention his name. He mentions everybody else but him. Now, that disciple was known unto the high priest and entered in with Jesus into the court. So John knew the high priest. He was a friend of the high priest. He knew the family. So he could walk up, they'd open the court, and he would be able to walk into the high priest's yard for this trial, but Peter couldn't get in. And so that then is where we'll have to pick up our story next week. Okay, class dismissed.